Well, we are absolutely delighted here. I can't quite believe that we're giving this presentation. So it's such an honour and a privilege to be here and to be a winner. Thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to give you a very brief overview of the work that our critical care unit has undertaken to really strengthen our foundations. My name is Anna Pettis. I'm a critical care consultant at University College Hospital London, and I'm accompanied by my two colleagues, Stephen Pearson, who is our critical care CNS, and and Manoj Judge, who is our critical care psychologist. So, is this working? Am I doing it right? So that's our hospital up there on the right. It's affectionately referred to as the Ivory Tower by many of our neighbouring trusts, and that's because our institution is privileged in numerous ways through our geographical location, our financial stability, and the wealth of research opportunities that we enjoy. And these advantages have really allowed us to maintain strong staffing levels and pursue excellence. However, two defining events took place between 2019 and 2020 that really tested the fragility of our so-called ivory tower and prompted some quite serious introspection. The first was a deeply unsettling episode of racism that left many of our nursing staff particularly feeling marginalised and leading to ethnic segregation and deeply impacting on our recruitment, promotions, and even the basic civility of our day-to-day interactions as a team. And the second, of course, was the pandemic, which was a global crisis that needs absolutely no introduction here, but its impact on critical care was nothing short of catastrophic. For the first time, we witnessed critical care stripped of its humanity. Our staff were faceless behind layers of PPE, caring for rows of prone ventilated patients who all lost their identity beyond what their clinical condition was and what organ supports they were on. So I don't think I'm exaggerating to really say that this is where we were back in 2020. We found ourselves in a place that we never quite imagined in our little ivory tower, unable to deliver the care that we aspired to. We're causing profound moral distress to our staff. Our patients were isolated from their families, our team was fractioned, and many of our colleagues had left the profession.
Cool. So strengthening the foundation to us just really meant gaining a sense of really what was happening on the ground, what was going on out there, really opening our eyes to it. So we held a few listening events from the staff side, so reflective practice spaces in which we could hear from the actual experiences on the ground, what it's like to work on the critical care unit, generally, but also amidst the pandemic. And a few themes came up from that, just lack of confidence in areas such as end of life, which obviously came up a lot, unfortunately, working with trauma and communication with families where there was additional needs and kind of complex needs. Exit interviews, so obviously a mechanism for gaining information about the reasons why we had such a high staff turnover, to show that we care and that we want to learn from it and that we want to take responsibility. And then an independent EDI review. So following the racist incident that Anna mentioned, an independent staff member came in and interviewed 100 of our critical care nurses, doctors across the MGT, and identified 9 key areas, like problem areas, that were going on. I'll list a few, so racism and discrimination being an obvious, clear one, difficulties in relationships, how we're managing international recruits, training and development, favouritism, lack of promotional opportunities, all sorts came out from that. And then staff survey, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that that it was pretty bleak compared to the rest of the trust. So our critical care division, we're not doing very well in our staff experience, and that was really highlighted in that kind of 2021-22 period.
In parallel with all the staff engagement work, we did a lot of engagement with patients and families. So right back at the start of the pandemic, we set up the family liaison team with lots of redeployed staff, mainly dentists from Eastman Dental Hospital. And they really bridged the gap between patients, staff and families. And they were really in tune with the experience of families during that time. We followed up that work with interviews with families and then focus group work with patients and families subsequently. We always trying to learn from complaints, but we had one complaint in particular a couple of years ago that was so emotive, and it really touched on aspects of care, communication, and the environment. And we really wanted to respond to that in a really holistic way, meaningful way, not just a not dismissive, but it didn't feel right to respond by letter. So we invited the family in, and the family and the staff, some of the staff involved in the complaint, sat around, and we really tried to learn what went on and what could we improve on. And it was a really really powerful experience for everyone involved, and really influenced a lot of our improvement work, especially around end-of-life care. We followed that up with more bereavement calls with families who've had loved ones who died on critical care, to really understand the experience and drive improvement work. And lastly, the survey. So we have a inpatient survey that we do with families and patients. It's our local survey, and we just really changed that so it elicited more meaningful feedback, both for improvement and for recognition and reward. So we could really, use it as a kind of positive and reinforcing praise, but also driving improvement. So these are the foundations that we built. There's lots of blocks on here. We're not going to go through all of them. And I think each one we could probably talk about for a good hour or so. We won't. So this is just a lot of the teams, events, initiatives that we did for patients, families, and staff. So the two at the top are really kind of integral to this improvement work. So the Staff Experience and Engagement Committee and the Patient Experience and Engagement Committee, which meet monthly. They're multidisciplinary. The Patient Experience Committee has lived experience partners on it as well. And it's really a mechanism for really getting hands on what the experience is for patients, staff, and families, and kind of setting the agenda for improvement work, disseminating improvement work, and supporting things that are going on in the unit. Back over to Napash.
Thank you. So this slide basically kind of captures everything that we did, what this kind of cultural change thing looked like. So at the core here is really just our three key principles, interconnected kind of underlying philosophies, which all go hand in hand, that we try to use as kind of a guiding framework for how we do things, essentially. So we've got person-centered care, so just obviously like individualizing that care, trauma-informed care, so understanding how trauma and early life trauma in particular impacts people's experiences, perpetuating health inequalities, and then ED&I, equity, diversity and inclusion, so recognizing that a lot of trauma can be due to discrimination, structural oppression, things like that. Racism, homophobia, gender bias, ableism in particular obviously comes up a lot. So really thinking about paying attention to these three key areas and using that as the basis to then build our structures around that. So we know that they interconnect because we can't have person-centered care without being attuned to the individual and that individual's trauma, or being aware of the impact of issues of equity, diversity and inclusion, of course. So all these approaches focused on cultivating a kind of sensitivity and understanding of what it's like to feel marginalised and traumatised. So those bits around that Venn diagram in the middle are all the structures in which we're able to enact this on the unit and actually do something about it. So like Stephen said earlier, we've got the Patient Experience Committee and the Staff Experience Committee, and then QI working groups, so actually loads of different working groups on like end of life or delirium and things. So I'm speeding up now because I know we're reaching the end. And then what else have we got? Education, so disseminating this kind of information. So we've done a huge round of various different trauma-informed care talks to our nurses, doctors that our team has been a part of in psychology. Research going on, we've got a doctoral psychology student that's doing her thesis based on our trauma-informed care project. And then obviously any new guidance and policy needs to be ratified by the powers above in the critical care division and the trust as a whole. So thinking about how we can get this, and seeping into everything that we do and everywhere.
Sorry, last slide. I think I'd just like to really rephrase this slide as to what am I most proud of. And I think what we've achieved began with compassionate leadership, and that's leaders that recognised that there was a problem and addressed it with humility. The response was really simple but powerful. It was to listen, to engage. And it wasn't just limited to our immediate team, but it extended to the entire multidisciplinary team, which very much includes our patients and our families. And whilst those two initial efforts, the patient and family experience and the staff wellbeing, they began independently, they were both driven by the same foundational principles of meaningful engagement and genuine listening. And over time, these principles have become increasingly embedded into the culture and transforming the way that we work. We're now learning to really harness the invaluable insights of those who have lived through critical care, developing partnerships with them, valuing the significance of their contributions, and we've embraced our differences and turned them into strengths. And as I reflect on this process, although it may sound as though our work is complete, I think it's far from it. Our goal is to really make this approach part of our DNA, and that's a thread that's woven into every aspect of our department. And to achieve that, we must continue to work collaboratively with our colleagues in education, governance, administration, and management to really ensure that this culture is strengthened and sustained. And so just so many thank yous, because so many people have contributed to this work, too many to mention. So thank you very much for listening.